Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Brent. I just want to thank you for tuning in for this past Sunday's sermon. If you are watching on our app or through our website, or if you're listening through wherever you catch your podcasts, we're so happy that you're tuning in with us today. We just want to invite you to take a couple minutes and fill out a Connect card, or if you want to give financially and partner with our ministry, right now is your opportunity to do that through the links below or the buttons below this video. We're going to start the sermon here in a couple minutes, but I just wanted to personally say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for partnering with us. We love you guys, and we just pray that this message blesses you. We'll see you in a couple minutes.
All right, you can take your seats. I don't usually intro Zach, but I'm going to hype him up today. If you don't know Zach, or if you've never met Zach, which I'm pretty sure everyone's met Zach, but if you don't know Zach, you should know Zach. Zach is awesome. I just want to say something. I met Zach by a food truck randomly 2.5 years ago. Like, totally random, met him in a food truck. I don't even know what we talked about. It was probably something ridiculous. But Zach showed up at a dinner party. He's been a part of our church since we launched it. And I believe in honoring people. I think you need to honor the people around you. And this man has given more to this church, more time, more energy, more thought, more care than almost anyone. And we would not be here without Zach and his family. We wouldn't be here without their investment. This building, Zach has spent hours over there. Even at the point when we left the other night, he was still cutting down the closet by himself. And I'm like, Zach, go home. And he's like, no, I'm getting it done. A couple hours later, I got a text, and he said, I ran out of steam. I'm done. But that's what he'll do. That's the type of guy Zach is. And I just want to honor him for a minute, because even for me as the pastor, he's the guy who'll come to me and say, Brent, you need a break. Let me preach. And I'll be like, no, that's my job. And he says, no, you got to take a break. Let me do it. And I'll fight him on it every time, but he's right. And but I just want to say we wouldn't be here without Zach and his family. So put your hands together. Give Zach a round of applause. He's preaching this morning. All
right. Thank you, Brent. Thank you guys all for coming. We're going to, Brent asked me to speak today, and this is actually the last time we're going to be in Nehemiah. Brent has a brand new series coming up, so you don't want to miss next week. I think Brent has everything planned right in through us going to the new building. But I just want to thank everybody that was there yesterday. Who worked on that basement north wall? I know Gary was down there, and Ryan, were you down there? Yeah, there was a whole crew of people down there. I'll tell you what, after the dust settled yesterday, I had no steam. I didn't think I was going to be there at all, but I ended up getting to go there, and I had no steam. I had nothing left, but I got to sit back and watch. And after everybody left and the dust settled, I got to go down to that basement. And I'll tell you what, that north wall was probably the grossest part of that entire building. It had mold on it. It had a century's worth of paint on it. I had no idea how long or how we were even going to reseal that stuff, and it was just a nightmare. But I was able to go down there, and personally, that is like the cleanest wall I've ever seen. I would eat off that wall. So I'd eat off that wall before I eat off any other surface in that church at this point. But I just want you guys to know, and for everybody that's been out there, but specifically that wall yesterday, that was a ministry to me. I was moved by that. I saw that because that wasn't just someone who came in and got a job done to say it was done. That was people that took pride in what they did, and they cared about what they did, and they poured their heart and soul and their love into that. And I was genuinely moved, so I want to thank you for that. With talking about Nehemiah, obviously the main thing that we talk about is the wall. And it's really hard to lose perspective on this wall and how massive of an undertaking it is. For me personally, I love movies. I watch a lot of movies. I try to get in at least like a half a movie a day. But I don't always watch high quality movies. I watch a lot of like B-rated, like low budget. Looks like it was like made for TV. The CGI looks like it was streamed through a potato. It's like, so a lot of times when you picture like, oh, Nehemiah building the wall, you view this like small TV set of like Nehemiah standing there, and there's like 6 guys in the background working on this like CGI wall, and it's like this small thing. But really, to put it in perspective, this was a massive undertaking. The wall itself was 40 feet high, 8 feet thick, 2.5 miles in length, with a total of 8 gates on there. And I think it's really cool, and the Bible pays honor. Nehemiah took time to pay honor to the people that worked on it. And in chapter 3, he lists out the families. And I think it's really cool. A lot of times you look in your Bible and there's lists. And we it's the part when you're doing your Bible reading, you pull it up, and it's like Matthew chapter 1, and it's the genealogy of Christ. And it's like, man, this is just like a list of names. What's the point? Why are these here? But I love lists. I love the numbers behind it. I love seeing because the reason the lists are there is it shows you the process. A lot of times people don't like to deal with the process. They like the end results. I can tell you right now that when we launch on Easter, there's going to be a lot of people we haven't seen in a year because the results are in and it's time to come and enjoy it. But very few people don't want to go through the process. And I loved it, and I'm not going to lie and say I know how to pronounce all the names in this list. I'm not that holy, I guess. But basically, to make it simple, like to simplify it, the way I read it, it says, basically, like, Scott got a group of people together and tore out the carpet. Or John, Ethan, and Tim went over to the building and they tore out the walls. Or Gary took a group of people and they went and worked on the north wall in the basement. That's basically what he's reading, is that these were families. They list a specific name, but they're saying that these are the families. Like when Aaron comes, and we can say Aaron came and worked on it, but it wasn't just Aaron. It was Aaron and his wife. It was Aaron and his kids. It was Aaron and his brother and his sister-in-law and their child. They were all that. There was a group of people that worked together on it. And I think that this is a perfect model. If you read through Nehemiah in its entirety, I think it's a perfect model for the modern day church. And you're saying, well, how does this relate? This makes no sense. You're talking about millennials difference. So why does that relate? But I think it's really cool. And if I were to do this paper, if I were to like submit this as like a thesis paper of Nehemiah is a direct replica of the modern day church, all I'd have to do is use one verse. And it would be chapter 11, verse 2, and it says, "The people commended everyone who volunteered to resettle in Jerusalem." And I don't know if that's more of a church statement than I ever heard. Basically, Jerusalem was rebuilt with volunteers, with unpaid labor. So that's just how the church works. That's how we're building this. It's just the individual families stepping up and wanting to rebuild, wanting to put forth their effort into it. And if you look at it, it actually lists, there's 2 lists. In chapter 3, it lists the people that rebuilt the wall and rebuilt Jerusalem. And then chapter 7, it's the people at the end of the process that showed up. And it's like, oh yeah, it's all done. It's great. But there's 2 important things here. And we focused a lot on the building process of the building of the wall. But actually, that takes place in the first few chapters. The rest of it is what they do after they rebuilt the wall. And there's 2 main things that I see in here that I believe relate to the modern church. First thing was there was a buyback, and the second there was a buy-in. Now the buyback, you can see it. It's in chapter 5. That these people they're trying to get all their friends, all their family now back home. Keep in mind, the Jews were exiled to Babylon. They were captured, they were enslaved, they were over there, and they're like, we gotta start bringing our people back. And in verse 8, it says, Nehemiah actually gets on his people for charging each other interest. But in the process of that, I think it's a really cool statement, what he says in verse 8. He says, we are doing all we can to redeem our relatives who have had to sell themselves to pagan foreigners. See, up until modern times, up until essentially 50 years ago, and even in some parts of the world still today, you are able to sell yourself into servitude. That if you needed income for your family, or if you had a debt you couldn't pay, you would be sold as an indentured servant or as a slave, that you had to repay that debt. And it would be for a time. Basically, this person say, hey, you own me for the next 5 years. I live on your property. I work for you. And at the end of those 5 years, my contract is up, and I am owed X amount of dollars, or I am forgiven X amount of debt. And actually, you could even take it one step further, and you could sell your children. Sometimes it's a tough decision, but it's not practical to sell maybe a specific key person in running the home or an adult, but you could sell your child to be raised by somebody else, and they would be a servant in somebody else's home. And it's a very shocking and jarring thing, and we don't like to think about that concept, but I think it really relates to the modern church and to the modern individuals, because you know what they're saying? Nehemiah is saying, the church has been built. We've rebuilt the walls. We have this home. We have this place. Now it's time to go redeem our relatives and our family and our friends. It's time to go buy them back. Because I don't think you guys realize this, but there's a lot of people that are sold. They've been sold into slavery. And some of you, and there's people around that some of you guys may have sold yourself into slavery. That through bad decisions or choices that you've made, you've made these decisions and you've sold yourself into this servitude where you're in bondage and you're not free and you don't have the ability to do what you want. Because you've basically sold yourself at a cheapened price for a momentary pleasure or a gain that won't last. But I've been in youth ministry I ran that for over a decade before I ever came to Anchor. And the sad part is some of us, and I see this a lot in youth because you're able to see the development, some families have sold their kids into slavery. And it's a thing that doesn't make much sense, and it's kind of a jarring, but let me talk it through here for a second. The Bible talks about generational curses. And I think a lot of times with the Bible and with Scripture, I think we try to make the certain things super spiritual, that they're this abstract spiritual thing. But I think I love science, I love learning, and I love the fact that the more I learn about science, the more it reveals about Scripture in my mind. And when it talks about generational curses, I don't think that's such an abstract thing. I don't think that means like you have a demonic presence following you around that's gonna that your parents put on you from the mistakes that they made and whatnot. But I think there is a passing down from generation to generation, either curses or blessings, because it also works both ways. You can also bless the next generation. But I think a lot of times, either knowingly or unknowingly, parents have sold their children into a slavery, into an indentured servitude. And the way that looks is you know these friends and you know these families, and they say, well, that family, they just struggle with alcoholism. Or that family, they really struggle with addiction to drugs and this and that. And I remember their dad, and they had this problem way back then, so it's not shocking that their son now deals with it. Or even problems with like mental health and depression, anxiety, other mental issues. Some of it is genetics, and we're learning more and more about that. But some of that, they're going back, and through psychology, they're learning that it's generational. Because someone can suffer from a mental illness, and that can be passed down generation to generation. Why? Because where the parent was supposed to impart a certain amount of love or a certain lesson or taught a person how to cope in an appropriate way, they were themselves not taught. And then they passed that lack of knowledge down to the next generation. And what Nehemiah is saying here is he's saying, all right, our church is here. We have our city. Now let's go get our friends and our family that are in servitude. And I love that view of the church, because that's the first thing we got to do is we got to get our people, our friends, our family. We got to get them out of debt. We got to redeem them. We got to bring them back to square one. And I think that's a cool process when people start, and you see it all the time. It's when you see a new person come in, and you could tell because they're like crying every message. Every time you could just see that God is just shedding stuff off them, and he's revealing stuff to them. And you can see wounds being healed and hurts that they didn't even understand, that they don't know why they act a certain way. They don't know why they do a certain way, but they can never seem to get over it. They can never seem to get past it. And it was supposed to just be the status quo because that's what their parents did as well. But you can see that transformation in their lives. You can see that the eyes are open and their hearts are melting, and these problems that they have faced for so long now fall off. And the beautiful thing about what the church does is the church, when we buy back that debt, when we bring that in, because Christ has already paid it, and it's our job to show it, to show that love. But that's when it stops here. That's why the children's ministry is so important, because we have broken adults coming in here. We have broken adults that they came in with a deficiency that's generational. And not only are we going to stop it in this generation, but we're going to make sure it doesn't get passed on to the next. That's why I love this new building so much. Guys, that north wall that I'm talking about, that is like the foundation of the children's ministry right there. It's the corner of everything of all the children's ministry. The vast majority of all the money that we're raising for this building goes into the children's ministry. Why? Because we love the children. We want to see the children fully restored. We don't want to see them going on into adulthood in their teenage years, being sold into a slavery, being sold into a debt, being put in a situation that they don't realize where they're heading, and then they have no abilities to get out of. So that's the first part of the church right there, is we're supposed to buy back. We're supposed to redeem. The second part that Nehemiah talks about is the buy-in. In chapter 13, verse 12, it says, "Once more, all the people of Judea began to bring their tithes of grain, new wine, and the olive oil to the temple storehouse." Now, one thing we need to understand about this city, you're looking, it's the wall is 2.5 miles long. Clearly, not everybody's going to be living inside this city. It doesn't actually make sense because the Israelites were an agricultural society. It doesn't make sense to have massive fields like fortified by a city or livestock or all that stuff, because livestock, they have to graze. They have to be constantly moved around to fresh pastures. There's no way, it's not possible to fortify the space you need to maintain and sustain a civilization like this. So why were people that weren't going to live in the city, why were people that weren't going to invest in their lives inside the city, why was it so important to have this city built? For me personally, I was obsessed with castles growing up. I was obsessed with medieval times. Most of my Legos in my early childhood were castles. I didn't switch over to the Star Wars genre until middle school. No one cares about that except for 5 of you, but that's the history of my nerderdom. But the main purpose of a castle is to fortify a region. So what happens is when an enemy would come in to take over a country or a whole region, a lot of times they would bypass these small villages, they would bypass the farms, they would bypass it all. Why? Because that's production. If they want to own the land, they want the land to still be healthy. They're not going to go commit straight up genocide and have to find all new farmers and train them in the new soils and figure out the genetics of the specific livestock to create good animals. So what they would do is they would pass all them because they wanted to sustain as much as what they could. But what they would do is they would go to that central location, the castle or the fortified city. Because in order to control a region, you had to control that fortified city. If you controlled the fortified city, you had your army inside that city, then you were safe. You had everything else around you was under your control. And in the same way, the Israelites and the Jewish people understood this when Nehemiah was building the wall. That's why they were so interested in and put so much energy. Guys, they built this wall in 52 days. No one works and builds a wall in 52 days unless your life's at stake. And they knew that. And Brent's talked about in previous message how there was enemies mounting against them and they wanted to attack. So these guys were working night and day, not just for, oh, look at this shiny wall we built, guys. It's really nice. And look at this new church we built on this corner. Look how fancy it is, guys. Their lives depended on it. They had to get it done. They had to do it because they knew at any day, at any hour, at any night, the enemy could come. And the idea of this message in verse 3, it says that the people began to bring their tithes. And the Jewish people, when they entered into a covenant with God, God says, look, I'm going to require you to do A, B, and C. And in one of these requirements, I'm going to require you to give a tithe, a 10%. And the reason behind this is because God's an intelligent God, and God understands how things works. And Israel was meant to be a theocracy, which means God was in control. God was their president. God was their king. God was their governor. So they looked to him for everything. And God says, bring a tenth, bring a 10% into the storehouse. But why would he say that? In any financial program, in any get out of debt type program that you want to go through, they teach you two things. One, obviously, is to pay off your debt. That's pretty straightforward. But the second thing is, simultaneously, while paying off your debt, they say to start saving money. It's a twofold thing, because if you're working on just continually trying to pay off your debt and you keep no money aside and then crisis happens, car breaks down or house needs to be repaired or your kid blows out their tennis shoes and they need another pair, you're constantly going to go back into debt because you don't have the ability to weather those crises. And God understood this with the Israelites, so he says, you know what, you need to start bringing a 10% in. So why? Because when the famine comes, when the attack comes, when the crisis comes, you already have that built up. You already have that stored up. So guys, that's the two important parts there. You got the buyback. First of all, we get our people out of debt. And please, I know I'm the guy that talks about money every single week. Do not take what I'm saying and just think I'm talking about money. It's literally like the last thing I'm talking about right now. That's not the important thing that I'm trying to say. I'm using it as the example here because this is what is in the Bible. This is what was written down. But the first thing is we got to buy it back. We have friends and family that are lost more than ever this year with COVID, people hurting. People out there, they're suffering, they're feeling isolated. Mental illness is just rampant right now because people that are suffering, that maybe they had it moderately under control and we're dealing with it, now we're just thrown into a spot where it's unmanageable for them. We have people that have sold themselves. They've gotten into physical debt because they didn't have a choice. Jobs were drying up and the options weren't there. So that's our first option there is to buy them back. But then most importantly, we got to buy in. And I want to show you an example in my own life of the buy-in here. Brent talked about me at the beginning, and I did. I met Brent we were just sitting next to a food truck at a festival one day. And Bo, if you guys remember him, he came up and says, hey, meet Brent. And I knew Bo, and Brent knew Bo, and that was the end of it. So we launched in September 2 years ago. But for me personally, about 2 years ago, one of my businesses came under attack. We had some weaknesses in the business, and there were some people that decided they didn't like me. They decided that in their mind they were going to paint me as this evil person. So they used the weaknesses in the business to exploit it, to create this massive media frenzy around me. Things got bad really quick. All of a sudden, we had news reporters showing up at our house. We were getting threats. All of a sudden, I'm going to court cases. We got death threats. My son got a death threat, people threatening to strangle him. And it got real scary. I mean, police were being called to our house. All over social media, people were blasting us, just making me look bad, just in every malicious way possible. And at that time, a lot of people were distancing themselves because they didn't want to get caught up in all the drama. And then you have Brent over here, 4 months into launching a church, after a year of relocating his family across the state to start Anchor. And he starts getting emails through the Anchor website saying, hey, I can't believe you would have someone as evil as Zach Keeler as a pastor in your church. I can't believe that you would allow someone like that to attend your church. I can't believe, and Brent told me about this. Now I'm like, Brent, I don't want to hurt Anchor. I was like, basically I told him, cut me loose. I was like, let me go. Like, preserve Anchor. This was your life's mission. You just relocated your entire family. I mean, guys, it was scary. We have a driveway alarm on our driveway, so when someone pulls in, like employees or something, the alarm goes off. And if someone were to show up at a time that it wasn't scheduled, like, my heart would start racing. It's like, where's the gun? Where's the dog? Like, what? Like, it was a very scary time. And I go to Brent and I said, Brent, I don't want to hurt Anchor. I don't want to hurt these people. A lot of these people have given not just their time, but you've given your money into this, and I don't want to do anything that could possibly bring Anchor down. And band, if you want to get up, you guys can come on up here. And Brent, in typical Brent fashion, just said, I don't care what people said. I don't pay any mind to it. So not only did he just not cut me loose, he says, you're hosting this week, go up on stage. So he throws me up on stage to do the offering message and to welcome everybody, to make not only just a statement to the people that were sending him the emails and all that stuff, but most importantly, to make a statement to me and to my family. Because we were struggling, we were scared, we didn't know what to do. I've never dealt with this before. I was not used to standing before judges and giving testimony and all that stuff. But what Brent did is I came to him and said, Brent, cut me loose. And he says, no, you've invested in this ministry, and I'm going to open the storehouse. You see, the most important thing about the storehouse is it was located inside the city. Why? Because it was the safest place. It was the fortified place. That's why God's saying to bring all that stuff into the storehouse, because he wants to know it's going to be safe. Because he understands humans that we're going to go all out and spend every dime we have and put everything out there. And then when crisis happens, we didn't put anything in reserve. So I'd invested in Anchor up front. I'd invested my time in helping to launch and pulling all those cases that some of you guys hear about that were, it's like a dozen of them the size of a refrigerator that we had to move every single week. But in that moment, Brent said, no, you've invested in me. You've invested in this home. So not only am I not going to turn you away, but I'm going to bring you in even closer. So we started hanging out with my family. We started going over his home. We started hanging out. Our kids got a chance to take a break. We got a chance just to check out of life for a little bit and just find peace and find rest. And guys, I think that point is so important. I get up here every week and I talk about offering and we talk about volunteering and all this stuff. I'm not doing this to build this building for the sake of having it, or to have a clubhouse for me and my friends. It's not about that. But what this building is, it's a storehouse. Because there's going to be a time in your life where you didn't do anything to cause it, you didn't foresee it, but there's going to be crisis in your life. And you're going to be caught in a place where you're short. And at that point, this church is here. You have friends and family that are going to get caught short one day. And you're going to be here through Anchor. And we've seen this already this year. I mean, I use this as a personal example for myself, but then there was also, COVID hit and the world got thrown upside down. Then there was people that all of a sudden they lost jobs, they lost income, they didn't know what to do. And they were able to come to us, come to you. A lot of the stuff you don't hear about, but they came here to you guys. And we were able to open that storehouse. You see, the storehouse is not an abstract thing. This isn't just some super spiritual thing that God says, give me the tenth, give me your offerings, give me your tithe, come volunteer, come serve. He's not saying this as just an act of worship to him, although it is, because it's a sign of trusting him. But he's saying that when that time comes, when you are finding yourself lacking, that when your marriage is crumbling, or the mental illness is just getting the best of you that week, or your son and daughter decide to rebel and you don't know where to send them, you can run to the storehouse and we can open it up. And all that investment that you stored up, all the investment of these people, of this group, can be poured out onto the individual. Because there's no point in redeeming the lost. There's no point in redeeming the hurt and the sick and the wounded if we can't keep them out of debt. If we can't keep them whole, if we can't keep them safe, if we can't keep them secure. So in this story of Nehemiah building the walls, this is why we build the walls. Because I don't want to see any friends, any family. I don't want to see any of you. I don't want to see your family ever have to sell themselves into debt. I want to buy them all back, guys. That's why Brent's saying I'm working there night and day, and I am. I mean, I'm there like 6 days a week. I can't stop. And if I'm not there, I'm just staying awake thinking about the projects I should be doing over there. You guys know this. I have an obsessive personality. Once I start something, I can't finish it. But there's an end date, and there's a payoff beyond any energy we could put into it. And just like Brent said, that's a miracle that we ever got this building. It is a miracle, but at the same time, it's expected. Because when you are faithful, when you do invest, when you put your talents and your gifts at the throne of Christ, the Bible says He will repay, He will bring back. He says you can't comprehend the gifts and the plans that He has. You can't comprehend, you can't quantify. And we're blown away by this building, but honestly, I see this building as just a start. It's not the end. We're not going to launch in 9 weeks for Easter and be like, well, we made it. No, we're going to pick up those hammers and we're going to start on that next project because there's still more people out there. We're going to make our city bigger and bigger and bigger so that when the attacks come, more and more and more people can run to us. The storehouses become bigger so that the relief can become even greater. So in closing, I walked through the process of what the church should do. That first we build and come together, which we're doing, and really we've already done. Then we got to buy back and buy in. And individually, you may be in any point of that spot. You may be sitting there right now, and you need to be bought back. That you're sitting there right now and saying, you know what? I don't feel whole. I feel like there's something missing. Or you might be saying, I've been struggling with this issue my whole life and I can't rectify it and I can't quantify it and I can't get past it. And no amount of discipline, no amount of efforts on my part can ever get me past it. But right now, guys, I'm telling you that if that's you, you can be bought back today. Because Christ came to redeem us all. He came to say that there is no more debts. There is no outstanding balances because He said, I paid that price. That all you got to do is come to Him and say, I'm done. I'm yours. And He'll wipe the debt clean because He's already paid it. And then secondly is the buy-in. And for the last time, don't just think I'm talking about money because that's just the last thing on this. But there is a purpose to the local church. This is not a country club. This is not a place that has a membership fee to come attend any events that we choose or anything like that. It's not about that. The purpose of the local church is to come together and to stand together, to pool our resources, to pool our talents, not only to continue to redeem the lost through Christ, but to make sure that from here on out, we all live that debt-free life. I said last time, I'll say it once again, it's not about money. That's not what I'm talking about. It's not debt in the physical sense. My children will never be in debt as long as I have anything to say about it. as long as I have a church at home, that if I can't handle the undertaking, then there's somebody else that will. It's a community that will make sure my family stays whole, that my children are whole, that my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, that we're not passing down generational curses, that we're passing down the blessings. So I encourage you, if you've not bought in, if you just casually come here every week and you get a 20-minute sermon and some nice music being played at the beginning, and then you just leave, you're missing it. The ceremony of the service is not the church. It's just the way we operate it. But it's the living life together. It's the doing things together. It's the good times and the bad times together. That in order for us to be successful in this life, in order for us to undertake the life that Jesus commanded us to do, it can't be done alone. So if you're out there and you're saying, I want a community, I need a community, this is it. And lastly, if you're already part of this community and you're saying, I'm hurting, this year was rough, I have some things going on that it keeps me up at night. Tell us. Let us open that storehouse to you. Let us partner with you. Let us be there with you. Let us walk with you hand in hand through this moment in life. Through this, and I say it's a moment because it's temporary. But that temporary event can seem like an eternity when you're alone. But when you have someone to walk with you, when you have that group, when you have that camaraderie, that's when you're successful. That's when we walk through. So don't go through this alone. There's no reason to. We're here. I beg you with everything in me to take me up on this offer. There's no reason we should have to be going through this alone. And together, the more we build, the more we can bring in, the more the lost. And that is the church. That is the purpose. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you. God, I thank you that you understood that it was not good for man to be alone, that you decided to put us in a community, that you ordained the church to be a place where believers can come together, not just to congregate for our own satisfaction, but to help each other when the times get rough, to work through the problems that life presents us, but most importantly, that we be a tool to redeem those who are alone, to redeem those who have been sold into sin. God, you have given us a mandate that is heavy, but God, it is so exciting. The opportunities you present us are just beyond what we could comprehend. And God, I pray that we would just continue to be faithful in the blessings that you have given us. And God, right now I'd like to pray over everybody in this room on an individual basis. God, I pray that if they are hurt, if they are wounded, if they are dealing with the sins of the generations past, that God, today you would break that today with them, going on today and tomorrow and the next day, that would stop here, that they would be redeemed through your love, that they would be redeemed through your word, and that every day here on out is for the better, and that the sun shines all the brighter. God, we thank you and we love you and we ask you all these things in your Son's name. Amen.